All right, so very special workshop. This is on branding and design. And I am very, very fortunate today to have Iain Hamilton with us. Iain, say hi to everybody.
Oh, yes, I am here.
He's here. And if you guys haven't been to the course yet, what we're talking about now in this workshop is all based around what we're starting to build in one of our courses. So this is it's a real good opportunity for you to actually ask a specialist branding expert that we've got Iain here. So guys, go to tutorials.newzenler.com. Make sure that you're in the NZ Masterclass bundle, okay, which is down here. And inside there, you're going to find a course called Branding and Design. All right. So you enroll to this, you basically get access to all of these. Branding and Design is in there. And this course we're starting it, and there's some just priceless information in here. So inside this course, we have Iain's Branding Blitz, which we're going to go through today. And he's really kindly put 2 videos in there to help the community. Now, why did this come about? This come about because there was a post on one of the groups, and I posted something up, and Iain replied, actually contradicting kind of what I said, but we were in the same kind of boat. So then I talked to him afterwards, and we thought there was a real need to just get people thinking more about branding, because it's so powerful. It drives everything. And also it makes life easier for you later on. Once you've got all your branding colors, you know your market. Iain's going to talk about markets and analyzing these sort of things. Once you've got your typefaces, your font set, once you've got your color palette, once you know that direction, then it's really easy to produce lots and lots of media later for social media, not just the Zenler site, but for other sites as well. So it really drives everything that way. And what Iain's talking about in the Branding Blitz is actually marketing as well. So it's like it covers so many things, as Iain will talk about. So you definitely need to go and have a look at this course. If you haven't seen it already, get in there. Now, also, I do a case study, which I'm going to show you a bit later. And that is using William Song's site, which is an e-learning site. It's actually got 2 sites. So I'm going to flip across and show you them. And then we've also got another site to look at, and we're going to just talk about some improvements with that as well. So at the end of this workshop, you should have a clearer idea, and you should start to use what we're talking about now into your site. So just have a look at your site and follow it through like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let Iain just introduce himself here. So I'm just going to stop sharing, and Iain, if you'd like to say a few words.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. Actually, this is, as you say, David, this is a huge part of any kind of marketing, is to understand who you're talking to and what you're actually saying. So, and I've been working in branding as a professional. My background's in graphic design, actually, but I've been working in branding now for about 20 years specifically. So both for and mostly for global organizations and agencies. So I've seen both sides of that coin, the creator side and where, all that agency angle, but also, and more importantly, actually, for the last 10 years, I've been working client side, which is basically working in organizations and helping them from within. And it gives you a great opportunity to see the machinations and the different complexities that help branding take hold in the market, or hinder it, actually, depending on the approach. So what I'm excited about today is to kind of take those same principles and use them for smaller businesses, because it's the branding it's not a huge advertising budget exercise type thing. This isn't Coca-Cola. It's really about relationships between you as in your business and the audience or the customer that you're talking to. And the more personal you can be about that, the more dynamic that relationship's going to be. And and that's really what branding is all about, is that dynamic relationship between you and your customers. So Today we're going to explore that. I know you and I have spoken about it, and it's a great opportunity for people who might not, might be a little vague about what branding is, or even if it's valuable, and I'd like to, my goal today is to show that it's hugely valuable, and it happens whether you take part in it and try and influence it or not. So the key is that you want to be able to influence it, and to kind of promote that dynamic relationship. And I like to look at it, and this is my guiding light personally, is McLaren McCann is an advertising agency, been around for a long time, decades and decades, and original Mad Men people, and their motto is truth well told. And I've always thought that that's what branding is all about, is truth well told. So, you really want to make sure that people have an accurate understanding of the value you're going to bring them. That's what branding is all about. It's making sure that they have an accurate understanding of the value that you're going to bring them. And, that's really, it's a win-win situation in that regard. And this is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I think, Iain, as you said there, a lot of people think branding is just your colors and your logos and your font type, but as you show, it's a lot more than that. It drives a lot behind it, and people might look at it and go, oh, that's marketing, but they do interweave with each other.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to market something. What is it you're marketing? I mean, this is the question. And what you're marketing is really your brand, right? I mean, it's that at the end of the day, if you have a great relationship with your customer, that's going to lead to more sales. I mean, this is a natural progression. If they want what you have and it serves them, then that relationship is everything. And so that's what you're marketing. You're marketing that relationship at the end of the day. And it can look like you're selling something. You're selling a course or a membership or widgets. It doesn't really matter what you're selling. But the human relationship, the buyer, the person who's making that decision, that's really what it's all about. And so branding is about furthering that. And there's a lot of techniques to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about that today. But like you say, David, fonts and colors and things, those are branding tools, and not specifically branding itself. So, we'll talk about that too. I mean, they're important. In terms of influencing how people think, and making sure that your truth is well told, but how they work and why they work is the foundation of everything. And if you can get that right, then everything else, like you said earlier, everything else, whether it's online or not, everything else, every business communication you have is going to be much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it gives you direction. You know what you're doing. You've got a set of rules. Yeah, you can break them slightly, but you stay in those set of rules, and it gives you a real path to where you're going. So we're going to get into that a bit later. But what I want to do now is I just want to show you a little slideshow that I did. This is actually in the course, but I'm going to take you guys through it for you to just have a look at. Because the thing we've got to be wary of, especially you guys, you're not in design, you're not using design software, you haven't dealt with design companies, you've just got your site and your little niche that you want to sell to. And you're like, I don't want to get involved in design and all these things, because you think, oh, I can't get involved in design. I can't brand my company because I've got no experience of it, or I'm going to have to pay a fortune for someone to do it. And that is not the case. I mean, it is good to get things like logos, I think, done by professionals, because obviously we're using the software all the time and we can save you a lot of headaches and do a better job. But it doesn't mean you cannot do it yourself. But what you can do is you can get things started. You can start the process. What happens then is, one, you're thinking about your company, your brand and your design and your image. And the other thing is that if you're relaying that or giving that information to someone else like Iain, or anybody else that's doing designs and things like that, that information to them or people like me is really important, because then we've got a real clear picture of where you're going and we can guide you as well. So this will help you in certain parts, you know, whether you want to outsource your logos and those sort of things, that's entirely up to you. I always say have a go at it and see what you do, what you come up with, and then maybe post that same logo or PM Iain or something, and then get opinions of what you're trying to do with it, as we'll see. So I've got this slideshow here, and what we're going to do is branding and design with Zenler, and this is a big sort of question that sort of said, I lack creativity and suck with designing. Now, this actual phrase came from William. William's song, we're going to look at later, is in the case study. And I am so against this. You know, everyone has got a creative side in them. When you get out of bed in the morning, when you choose the color toothbrush that you're going to use in the morning, you're making design decisions. They might be influenced by that brand, but you are making a design decision, like whatever you do. So in creativity and design, in a way, it's built into us. It's just pulling it out. And obviously you can use tools and do courses and things like that and learn the color theory and all these things if you want to, but you do have it in you. Never say you lack it, because normally people that said that is because they haven't tried. Yeah, they're just like, I give up. It's like someone with, you know, if you're starting a painting, it's that old thing with the blank canvas. Lots of people have this. I used to teach painting, oil painting, acrylics, and they would have the blank canvas in front of them and they wouldn't start. It'd be like half an hour, 20 minutes, you know, 20 minutes, half an hour before they actually did anything on the canvas. And the hardest thing is taking that first stroke. After they've taken that first stroke, they're off. They're in the zone. So that statement is a very strong one, and that's why I put it on there. And it probably, a lot of you probably resonates with a lot of you guys. So do not fear. So going through things like making mistakes, what I say, this is kind of like a Zenler kind of mantra. And making mistakes, I consider equals self-improvement. You can get lots of positive things said about a site, but you've got nowhere to go then. So if you have people like you're posting things on Facebook and you're getting, you know, you're making mistakes, you're correcting them, yourself improving. So that ties us into criticism. So I always look at criticism more importantly, funny enough, than positive, you know, positivity about something. The reason being is criticism is like someone's opinion and you're taking it on board, so you can actually make a positive improvement, which moves you forward and stops you stagnating and being happy with something and leaving the site up for years and years and not changing it. So the other thing is laying it all out there, not being afraid. So if you lay everything out there, you try and do a logo and you don't know, you think it looks good, you put it out there and people like it, you're actually committing, you're putting your work out there. That's why I was very, very, you know, happy about William actually saying, use it as a case study, because that's hard. It's really hard to have your work out there and someone look at it and criticize it when you probably spent hours and hours working on it. And so I consider that that is not being afraid. By not being afraid, you're achieving success. So obviously those 3 points above equals a confidence in your brand, you know, so you're putting out there, you're making corrections and you're using all the tools that you need to, such as the Branding Blitz, to move forwards. So the other thing is, this is all mindset things, you know, this is all how you've got to think about things. When you've got to look at the process as fun. If you don't look at it as fun, you're not going to maintain it. It's like anything, like if you go running and it's a chore because you want to lose weight and you don't enjoy it, you're not going to keep it up long term. It's like going to the gym or anything. So I always try and find things that I think are fun that actually do another cause as well. Like I'd go surfing, so it keeps my fitness up, but I enjoy it. It's fun. So when I'm designing, I often put music on as well. So spelling mistake there. So play music to relax. And I often, and this is quite a common thing, I often put different music on depending on what sort of work I'm doing, you know. So I might put a bit of jazz on, or I might put like classical or even heavy rock, depending on the work and the mood that I want to get into what I'm trying to do. So also take breaks and split the workload into manageable chunks. So this is really important. Don't overload yourself. Break everything down into chunks. Now you'll see that the Branding Blitz that's coming up, Iain's done exactly that. He's broken things into separate slides that are manageable chunks, but when you put it all together, it forms a big picture. And that is a really important thing to do as well. So try to find your market. Branding Blitz will show you all about that. And look at what your competition are doing as well. So you want to look at, see what other people are doing, be influenced by other people or not, but take the best of their stuff and make it better. That will help you as well, for sure. And so then, you know, you're going to be setting your brand colors, you're going to be setting your font, and you're going to get a logo. So you're going to get a logo to work with those. So if you break this stuff down, then you have a summary of it. Look at the process as fun, try to find your market, set your brand colors, set your font, get a logo. So that's what I'm saying to you. Now this is really simplified, but this means that you can move forwards with it. So that's kind of how I look at these things as we move into the Branding Blitz, which Iain's going to talk about now. So what do you think of that, Iain?
I love it, actually. I mean, it's mindset is a huge part of it. You know, I'm seeing in the comments, people are, you know, they're, you know, kind of like, hey, Marie, you know, about paralysis and not really knowing, and it's confusion, but, you know, approach it as a fun thing. This is really about personality, right? I mean, it's branding is all about your personality, and whether it's you, and I've also seen comments, I think it was Phoenix who mentioned about personal brand names versus company brand names, that kind of thing. And, you know, it really comes down to what's that relationship, right? What's it going to be? And so, you know, when it comes to, when you think about that, it's either your personal personality as an entrepreneur, or it's your company's personality, right? So which one is it? I mean, don't confuse those two. So it can be either. It really depends. I mean, obviously, if you build a brand around your own name, that's much more personal and easier to manage at the beginning, certainly, but much more difficult to exit. You know, if you want to sell that brand later on, it's really difficult. You know, like look at Oprah. You know, she's the brand, and if she's not part of the whole Oprah thing, then it diminishes the value, if you like, of the brand, and it gets when it gets into that kind of brand equity conversation, that's when it really starts to change. So it's easier at the beginning just to be yourself. David Zenler, you know, or Zenler in your case, but, you know, David's David, and that's it. And your personality comes through, and it's a very natural way to brand, right? Because you're just talking about who you are, which is easier to get a start. It's more difficult if you have a company and you're trying to brand that, because that can almost seem like a disconnect, you know, almost like it is a separate entity. And so how do you do that? And so we're going to look at that today. So you can kind of almost like divorce yourself from the process, because it makes it easier to look at it if you're a little more objective, right? So that's one of the keys. Actually, one of the, you know, you mentioned about getting professional designer, David, and so on. And yeah, you know, I think it's good for people to get into designing their own logos and things, because, you know, your personality can come out, and it also illustrates what you're trying to achieve. And even if you do end up getting a professional to work on it with you, they'll look at what you've done, and there's a lot of clues and cues in there about, you know, the kind of thing you want to be seen as, and they'll be able to help you. But one of the keys to getting someone else is involved is that objectivity, because it's difficult to, you know, as I say, you know, to read the label when you're inside the jar, you know. So getting someone else to do that can often shed a lot of light on what you're trying to achieve. So it's got a lot of value just for that.
Yeah, I did exactly the same thing with my logo for Mojo Mojo. I had one, but then I was like, you know, I don't know where to go. So a good friend of mine is a branding expert as well. So I just handed it over to him and said, look, do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what he come out with was completely off of what I'd done, but actually right on track. So it was perfect. So even me, you know, I do it because of that objectivity, because of what he knew that what I was trying to get across, because I've got tons of content, but it was kind of to get it to fuse together and to work. So it, you know, everybody does it, and it's a really good thing. And I think, like, guys, like, you got Facebook here, you've got our Facebook group, everyone's safe and good in there, and there's experts like Iain in there. You know, me, I do it as well. So you post up what you've done. You know, you post up your logo, and we give you good, honest critique, you know, and it's priceless, because people pay a lot of money to have stuff done like this, to have people look at it and give their opinion, and you're getting it for free. So it's great. So Iain, I'm going to move on to the Branding Blitz now. So I'm going to share my screen, and Iain's going to talk us through this, because it's his baby. Here we go.
Right. So, yeah, why me? So I've already talked about that. Let's move on to something more interesting. So this here is something I want everyone to kind of grab hold of, because branding is really, and this is from your perspective as a business person, right? This isn't like I kind of defined branding before as a dynamic relationship, excuse me. So, but from a business perspective, it's about creating psychological selling conditions, or for your customers, psychological buying conditions. And either way, it's really about setting the tone of that relationship, right? So that they can see your value. We spoke about truth well told. And if you keep that in mind, you know, it removes, there's a lot of, you know, advertising, branding, and so on has a lot of, you know, there's a lot of manipulative tactics in there and things that aren't really healthy for anybody. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about truth well told. We're talking about the true value you're going to bring to your customer, because that's the key. And you must believe in it, right? The first sale is to yourself. So you have to believe, if you're going to sell something, that there's actually really true value there, for your customer. So they don't know that, of course. So creating the psychological selling conditions is really all about that. It's about showing your customer what that value really is.
Yeah. So Iain, on that note, would you say with the psychological selling conditions, actually, like using other people's work, that would not apply? So not to use their work, to do it all yourself, and not actually use other people's work to try and sort of sell it off as your own?
Right. Well, I mean, one of the key components of branding is to be different from your competition, so you can stand out. I mean, if you're just the same as everybody else, you know, this just becomes this noise of people all competing. It's like the red ocean. If you're familiar with that metaphor, you know, and it's nobody can see you, and they can't see that value. So being different, and, you know, differentiate or die is a common term in branding, and it's or distinct or extinct. You know, those two things. So it's kind of like you have to really be individual. You have to stand out, be unique, in some way, for your customer to be able to even see you. And well, we're going to talk about that too. There's a lot of ways to do that, and some of the slides we're going to go through will point you in the right direction for that.
Yeah, I've got a question here, Iain. So Dr. Jacqueline's put, hit the nail on the head. I often wonder if I really offer anything of value.
Yeah, right. Need to sell myself to myself is 100%. You know, like I said, the first sale is to yourself. And if you don't believe in it, you know, if you don't truly believe in your heart that there's value in what you're giving, then it's going to be really difficult to ask for that value. So it's a key. I mean, you can utilize lots of, you know, talk to other people. That objectivity we're speaking about earlier, David,
Yeah.
Is helpful for that, because you might not see the value. I mean, there's this whole curse of knowledge concept where, you know, you kind of, especially, by the way, and this is very important, but if you're naturally gifted at something, it's very easy to think that that's of little value to anybody else because it's come so easy to you. But to other people, it can be, it's just like a miracle. They look at it and they think, wow, and it's of such high value to them. They would give anything in some cases to actually be able to do what you can do naturally. But so we have to be aware, and that's where the objectivity comes in. We have to be aware of the value that we naturally have, and you can really bring yourself down, or you can undervalue yourself. So I'm seeing, yes, imposter syndrome is real. It's true. I mean, these are like curse of knowledge. And in many cases, a lot of people I've worked with are naturally gifted at one thing or another, and because of that, they just figure everybody can do it as well. So it's really important to understand that when you have value for someone, that you get that self-confidence to realize that value and what it is actually worth in the market. And there's different ways of doing that too, and we'll touch on that as we go through the slides, David.
Yeah, it's a very powerful statement, that, and applies to a lot of people, especially with people that they just don't have self-belief in themselves. So this is why, like Iain was saying, put it out there, let other people test it and look at it and tell you, and you'll be surprised, because you'll be like, oh, well, I thought it was rubbish, but actually people really buy into this. I read this thing somewhere that's saying you can teach that if you know something more than someone else, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner, right? If you know a bit of information more than someone else, you can teach that person, then you can build and you can teach them further. So it's like a stepping stone effect. Nobody knows everything. You can get as far as you can get, but you're always learning in life. So there's always going to be someone ahead of you, and you're always going to be ahead of someone else. So if you look at it like that, then it makes it a little bit easier for you to not get so down on yourself, which is something that happens to all of us. We feel down on ourselves because we're not doing a good enough job. Look at that person. They're doing really well. Why am I not doing really well? And it's kind of, it can be a kind of, a revolving thing where you're just looking at that and just repeating that thing over and over again, and it's not a good place to be. So you've got to break free of that, and that word there, psychologically selling conditions, is perfect for it.
Yeah, and it's important to realize that you don't have to be the best in the world at what you do. You just have to, like you say, you just have to lead people to be better at what they do. And that's really what it's all about. And being different is more important, because everybody's different, right? We're all individuals. So, and who do you want to align with? Who do you feel attracted to? That kind of thing. And so that's what really at the heart of what we're going to talk about today. So I see this vision and values. Now, this is, I'm hoping a lot of people might be familiar with this. This is Simon Sinek. He brought it to popularity, although this has been used in branding for, eons. But it's really about why you do what you do. And, the center of the circle there is all about why. So Simon's approach is, people buy from you because of why you do what you do. And more importantly than what or how. And that's true. It's the heart of it. But the fact is that your customer will approach this, if you look at this from the outside of the circle, right? So the first thing they're going to look at is what you do, because that's what when people type in a Google search, they're looking for a solution to their problem, right? And that's really what you do. If you're a plumber, then what you do is, you fix their plumbing, and that's what they're going to type, in their Google search. But then, it's like, well, how do you do it? Like, how do you do that? And it's like and everyone's going to have different answers to these, obviously. But at the end of the day, what keeps you going? Like, and why is not just what keeps you going. This is also about the value, right? So, I mean, why has to be in a commercial relationship? Why has to be about the value that you are bringing to your customer. It can't just be your own why. Like, I'm motivated to do this because, that's important, obviously. Yeah, it gets you through the messy middle and all those kind of things. But from your customer's perspective, and branding is all about the customer perspective, right? It's got to be about why it's important to them. So this why is it's not as superficial as some people might think, and understanding the value that we spoke about is a key to unlocking the why for you and your business. So having said that, here's mine. This is just to illustrate how this works, right? So what I do is I help businesses stand out. That's really what I'm all about. And that you can see loyal customers. That's key. The loyalty part of that is key, and that's the relationship we're talking about. And how do I do it? Well, I create these personas that we've all been talking about, and you can see I've got what I call a Fred score in there under the how part, which is familiar, relevant, esteemed, and differentiated. These are things that you really want to strive to be as a brand. And then why do I do that? Well, I love people to start with, and I when I see different personalities and identities, that just becomes it's a beautiful kind of resolved thing in my mind. So the more distinctive people are, and the more strongly defined their identity is, the easier and the relationship is to have with them. When people are indistinct and wishy-washy, you don't know really where you stand, right? That's just like, think of personalities and people. If people are, they're wavering and they're not really sure of themselves, and you don't really understand where they're coming from, it's very difficult to trust that person. And brands are no different, right? So the heart of it all is trust. And so the more strongly defined you are, and the more clear you are about what you stand for as a brand, the easier it will be to trust you. And not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone is. It's okay, because part of branding is to be so sure and confident in your stance, and who you are, that you feel comfortable repelling people who aren't your tribe, your audience, and that's okay. So it's important to understand that you don't want to try and win over everyone. You just want to you just want to be relevant to your own audience. Yeah. So if you want to move along, David, the next one here is about value proposition. And I think this is a marketing term, right? And people go, yeah, value proposition, blah, blah, blah. And it's what this actually is. This isn't copy. You're not going to see this in your headlines, and you might see kind of wording to that effect. But this is really a compass for any business, really. It's the heart of the value that you have. And we've spoken about value a lot today so far. But really, if you look at this model here, and I've got a sample coming up on the next slide, David, if you want to go in there, and it kind of illustrates it. And this, I've used Apple because everyone knows the brand. It's, it's kind of overused, but in that way, it's more familiar. So, but you can see how I've filled in the blanks. And it's really, if you imagine this is you, so brand is you. And who's your audience? And we'll talk about that in a sec. But who are they? And in Apple's case, it's all about they're really, you can see from their marketing. It's they had the pirate brand at the beginning, right? And sort of the underdog individuality, and they create that seeing the world differently. That was their kind of positioning, but that's really what they give you. That's what they deliver. And they do that by creating these deep human connections. I mean, Apple's always been about that. It's not really about the technology. It's about, the feeling that people have in buying the products. And so that they can inspire their customers to think different. And we'll see that, you see this concentric circles we just looked at, the what and the how and the why at the center of that. You can see how important that is to a value proposition here. Mm-hmm. So once you've defined that for yourself, what you do, how you do it, and why you do it, once you've done that, then you're starting to build a value proposition, which is really the heart of your business that you're going to go about in the future. And all we have to fill in there, the only missing component really is to really narrow down who your audience is. So if we go in here, speaking of audience, that's a niche, right? Or a niche, or whatever you want to call it. But it's really, who is it? Whose opinion do you care about? Like who are you, who's gonna benefit the most from the value that you bring? So I like to look at it that way. Who's going to benefit the most from the value you bring? And it can be one audience. or it could be 2 or 3, as you see here. It really depends on how large your, what your business is like, what kind of niche, or what audience you're looking at. You can have prospective customers, could be 1, obviously. Members, if you have a membership, could be 2. You could have investors. So there's a lot of different ways to think about who you're talking to, because you really do need to understand those different audiences in order to, kind of foster and grow that developing relationship. So if we look at the next slide, you'll see in here that these are mine, by the way. So these are my examples. They're a bit corporate because most of my business is for corporates, but you can see there are different ways of defining it, and different questions you can ask that just help to clarify who you're talking to. One is these are kind of external, I like to call it attributes. And the next slide, we'll see the second component, which is the context. And so there's, again, define these questions for yourself, for your own audience, and ask them. That's another way. We'll talk about that. But this is going to, the whole point of this exercise is to bring clarity about who you're talking to, right? And what the world looks like. And the next slide, David, you'll see is a bit more of persona, who they are. This is kind of demographics, psychographics area, and that's a marketing kind of term that sounds a bit scary, I realize, but really, it's really just about, what are they doing? What are they up to? Who? And these questions are specifically demographics, right? So it's kind of like just understanding your audience a little bit more and a bit more depth. And then
and it really helps, doesn't it, Iain? Because it's like if you're writing things down, if you've got these printed out and you're writing them down, you can straight away see. And what happens is it can bring up other things as well. You can go, actually, that's that. It can change as you're writing these things down. You might have more points. You might want to just amend some of this and change it for what works for you.
Totally. That's what it's all about. It's just an example. So, all of these components, like, look, if you look down third from the bottom, what marketing channels can you reach them? So it's kind of, where are they hanging out? Are they in Facebook? Are they in Instagram? What are they, what's your audience up to? Where are they? And these are each one of these is going to give you a bit more information about what they're doing. If, what's their average annual income? Can they afford what you're offering? Do they have discretionary income? Depending on what you're offering, again, these are all key insights into who your customer is. And I think finally, the fourth one is really, this is, what value do you provide to these customers? I keep coming back to this because that's what it's all about. It's bringing value to someone. What's their pain points? What is it? And what differentiates you from your competitors? And we'll talk about that in a sec too. But long-term, short-term goals. These are all kind of motivators just to really understand where they're coming from and help you basically become the best friend of your avatar, your audience.
Yeah, Iain, exactly. You mentioned the word pain point there, and that's exactly what we've done at Zenler. We totally redesigned the way Zenler was worked. This is the new Zenler. It's the second iteration, and it was all built around marketing because we asked thousands of people, what is your pain points? What is your pain points with course creation or membership sites? So we had all this come back. Pain points were marketing. So again, then Zenler was built like marketing centric. It then become the main thing, and then things were built all out from it. So that is a classic case of that's how it worked, and you could fill that in there quite happily.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's that's the key difference between global brands, if you want to say, and a business person, a single entrepreneur, for instance. It's really about market research. Technology has advanced to such levels now that we can be everywhere. We can be a global brand all just by ourselves on our laptop, really. But the difference is understanding your avatar. And global brands invest a lot of money. And we're talking big dollars here in market research. And the whole point of that is to understand their avatar, their audience. And so, how do you do that? Without those kind of resources, how does someone do that? And there's two types of research. There's quantitative and there's qualitative. And so you can do that. You can't get into the quantities really. I mean, depending on your audience, maybe, but that's what professional market research does, is that, there's a lot of rigor and discipline in how they read the numbers, but you can do qualitative research where you basically want to establish that your value is valuable to your customers. And you can ask, you don't really need to have a huge sample to get that. There's just ask a few people who when you've defined who they are, which is what we're doing right now, your niche, just ask what they want, what's their pain point in terms of what you're giving them.
Yeah, that's the thing. You need to get this feedback, but having no feedback at all is just terrible, because you don't know. So you need to have a few people, get friends or again, Facebook, that we've got the group there. So you can find where these people hang out. I know where all my customers hang out. So I'm on all those groups and I'm helping those people, and they're asking me for advice, and then I'm pointing them at my courses. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. So the next slide here, this is something I encourage everyone to kind of build for themselves. Is name, do the work, ask them, find out the answers to the questions we saw in the last couple of slides, and create this persona for yourself. Name your ideal customer, so that it'll be, in this case, it's Jane. So it could be Frank, could be whatever, but even get a picture, even like, try and individualize this person. And the reason for that is that when you're talking to your audience through your marketing materials, whether it's videos or Zooms or just brochures, even old school like that, when you're talking to someone, the more specific you can be, especially when you're writing, if you're in your messaging and your key message points and things like that, if you can talk to Jane, you can visualize who Jane is. The more concrete that is, the more personal your message is going to be. So this is something that everyone can do. This it's fairly easy. You can see there's I've got some different points down here that we mentioned, psychographics, demographics, and things like that. But from a kind of high level perspective, imagine that Jane here is your best friend, and you're talking to her, and that's really gonna cement your messaging. So it's easy done. Just build this from the research that you can do to find out who those people, whose opinions you care about, whose value, who value what you do, who is that person, and build one of these personas for yourself.
Yeah, Iain, in the actual video that you did, you said really good thing, which is actually print it out, put it on the wall.
To
identify with it. You can look up, you can identify with it each time.
When you're writing, it's like, you mentioned, David, earlier about music, playing music. And I do that too, by the way, depending what the brand is, I'm going to crank up music that kind of fits with that. It gets you in the zone, and this also is key, print this out, put it above your desk, and then whenever you're creating material, just look up at that and think about what you'd say to that person.
You get that connection.
Exactly,
because you could lose it. You could get. We all get really into things and look down, but if you look up and stop, then you can get that connection back again, and you're not going to go off track. It's going to keep you on the path.
100%. So. Now this is my favorite slide of everything, and the reason for that is I find people are confused in general about branding and strategies and things like that, and how does that actually impact what they're doing, right? How does it get out into the real world, from strategy on one side to actually making a difference and moving the needle, as they say, right? And the way that's done is right here, and it's through attributes. And what you'll see, this is really, if you look at it, it's a list of opposites, and this is obviously an example. Some brands have one or two of these, and some have more than what you're seeing here, but essentially it's opposite. So cheap, luxury, traditional, innovative, and I've highlighted on this one just as an example, playful and serious. And the little blue line is like a slider. If you imagine it's a slider and you can move it back and forward, depending on where you think your brand needs to be. So it's kind of like, if you're a playful brand, like you see the example here, the little sliders right up to the left-hand side at playful. And if you're a playful brand, and you'll know that, right? I mean, it's just kind of like if your offer is, if it's something serious, then, your slider would be the other end. But if you look at and think about being a playful brand, that's really going to dictate or direct your choices when it comes to your marketing materials and how you present yourself to the world, right? If you're going to be playful, you're going to present think about color palettes. A playful color is a very different color palette than a serious color palette. You're talking maybe primary colors, something bright and with a lot of energy to it. Whereas serious at the other end of the scale would be muted, much more muted and toned down. Yeah. So, the exercise here really is to find your own opposites. You can use these. You can look some up on Google. There's all over the place. But find your own and that relate to your business. And then score yourself, as it were. Move the slider where you think it needs to be. And that, when you think about that, then you want to look at the extremes, because that's where you're really going to be, that's what's going to direct your communications. So that's why I put playful at one extreme. You can see some of the others like industrial and natural is in the middle, right? And those are, that's kind of wishy-washy. It's not that important when it comes to your branding. It's the extremes. One thing, if it's one end, youthful and established, you see on mine, it's much more towards the established side. So those are the things that are going to help to make decisions both in how you speak to people. So a playful voice, a tone of voice is playful is much different. Even the words you use as a playful brand are going to be different from serious branding. So you can see how it helps to define your marketing language. And the tone of voice, but also your colors we spoke about, your typefaces, like playful typefaces are way different than serious typefaces. And even where you hang out. So if you're playful, you're going to be on Instagram and places like that, not so much LinkedIn, say. So it really, defining your attributes are going to give you a lot of clues as to how you're going to show up. And how you show up is really about those psychological selling conditions we looked at earlier, David.
Yeah, this is I love this slide. It's brilliant because it gives you so much information so quickly. It's like you mentioned, Iain, it's like playful. It's straight over that side. You can straight away go, right, I'm going to go for bright colors. It's going to be slightly rounded. Straight away, you've got a visual thing just by dragging a slider.
Yeah.
You can have a look at, you can see that you've got industrial and natural. You're right in the middle. So a cross between the two, again, it's soft. So you might have some curves in there instead of using square buttons, you might use rounded buttons. That's just from looking at an attribute slider sheet. I mean, that's amazing, really. So that in itself, as Iain said, you can make it fit your particular thing. But if you imagine, you could do a few of these and literally you can have a little chart. You can almost have a little spectrograph of actually the ups and downs compared to another business, and it could almost form a little algorithm in itself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a practical exercise that takes your strategy from like basically what we've been talking about, your value proposition and all those marketing things we've discussed in your avatar and everything else. And this is the slide that converts that into tactics to get it out there and speak to them. So, don't be intimidated by the number of attributes on this particular slide. If you only have 2 or 3, that's even better because you're much more focused in that sense. I mean, if this was me, I'd look at this and I would think, well, how many of these are important to my brand? And I'd take out half of them, at least. But I just wanted to put in a bit more here to get a bit more of an example about what's possible.
Yeah, I guess looking at those extremes, where it is on that slider, and those are the ones that you're going to take very seriously.
Yeah. So the next slide. Now this is taking it to a different level here. So, and this can look a little bit, confusing or marketing speak here. But once you understand what you're looking at, you're going to see how valuable this can be for you. So, and this is, David mentioned playful earlier, and so this is where you need to play. So what we got here is a little simple matrix, right? So on the horizontal axis, I've just chosen two of those opposites that we just saw on the attribute slide, right? So cheap and luxury, it can be anything, and it can be any combination. So this is where playfulness comes in for yourself and have fun with it, is to take your attributes that you've defined are important for your brand and then make a little matrix like this, grab a bit of paper or do it on a PowerPoint slide, whatever. And I've got innovative and traditional on the vertical axis there. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to create some of these for yourself. And I'd recommend, if you find, what the key attributes are for you. And in this slide, for instance, innovative would be, say, important, and luxury. Let's say that, and speaking of Apple, that's probably where they are, unintentionally. But if those are your key attributes, plot them out like this, and then those little black dots we're looking at, those are your competition, right? And the reason for we're doing this exercise is because, you have to differentiate yourself. You have to be unique. You have to have something that stands out from the rest of your competition. And this is how you're going to do it. This is the way that every brand does it. And you can do this if you're a one-person shop too, is find those attributes, build yourself an axis like this, and then plot your competition, right? So let's say the bottom left there might be like, IBM or something very traditional. Well, not so cheap, but you know what I mean? It's you have to, like, within those attributes, just put a little dot where you think your key competition lie. And then it's going to show you, and in this case, it's the top right quadrant. It's going to show you where the vacancies or where the gaps are. So you can see that there's not, in this, and this is all made up. What we're looking at here, but everyone's on the bottom. Most are in the bottom half. Most are more traditional brands, and kind of wavering around the kind of midpoint in terms of cheap and luxury. So the gap, the opportunity, if you like, or the blue ocean, to come back to that metaphor. The gap is in the top right quadrant there. So you would think, well, if we position ourselves, obviously it has to be true to you and your personality and your brand's personality. But if you can position yourself as innovative and luxurious, then there's nobody else playing there. And that you're just by default, you're going to stand out because of that. And then we come back into, David, what we just spoke about, like in terms of colors and typefaces and language. The language of that quadrant is going to be almost a polar opposite of the bottom left quadrant. The cheap and traditional is going to be different typefaces, different color palettes, and so on. So these are all ways of using the design, the branding tools that we spoke about, the colors and fonts and things, as using them as tools to kind of cement that position.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's this is a great one as well. So guys, what you're looking at here is the further you are away from the other dots or the competition, you're going to find a niche market that's going to work for you. So if you're like right in this middle area here and you're fighting against major competition, you're probably going to lose. So if you can get away from it, like this one's away down here, got the niche in that area. So just as you would have the niche there, or if you were over here or here. So if you're further away from those big competitors, you're going to capture that a whole new market and set a new trend in that area where people are trying to get away from you. So it's amazing.
Totally. Yeah. And it's also important to realize that if you're known, and this is where the actual long-term value of branding is. And, most people, most certainly entrepreneurs and things, is a down the road kind of value. But the reality is that once you're known for something and you become established in one of those quadrants that we're looking at, it's very difficult to compete with that person because they're already there. That's what people, they're the market leader. They're the originators. They're the original, the first to market. And so the barrier to entry to compete with them becomes extremely high. So this is what it's all about in terms of major brand investments, is to build that equity and that kind of that positioning, the market positioning, or the place, if you like. I like to think of it as, the spot you own in your customer's mind. If you're top of mind when they're thinking about whatever category of business you're in, in other words, the what that you do, if you're top of mind, it becomes very difficult for someone else to come in and take that place. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's and the other thing is, you get it every day. You get these competition come in, and they're just looked at as clones. Clones.
Yeah,
the actual.
yeah, and me too, right? Everyone looks at, and this is I've seen this in global corporations too, that they're looking at what other people are doing in their market, and they're emulating that. Especially if they're successful. When Apple came out with the iPhone, everybody started emulating it, and it was very difficult to topple that. And because they all start looking, if you look at smartphones now, they kind of all do look exactly the same, apart from size, they're almost indistinguishable. So, the finding your spot, your blue ocean, is something that everyone can do. And this exercise is, it's dynamic and organic. It can change over time too. It's like, but if everyone can do this, even if it's small scale, it'll just give you a sense of how you can be different and how you can stand out. It doesn't mean what you're doing is different. It doesn't mean, you have to stop doing what you're doing and find something else. It just means what are the attributes that you can select that will distinguish you. And they have to feel natural, like we said. They have to fit with what you're doing. And this is where the playful and the that kind of dynamic approach comes in. Is that it's you have to kind of try things, test things, and look, but just be looking around, asking your market, looking at what your competition's doing, and just trying to find that blue ocean for yourself. Because once you establish yourself, and I've seen questions about, if you're does it matter at the beginning? And this is a small exercise you can do by yourself, right? You don't necessarily have to go to an agency or anything like that. You can do this because you know what your value is. Once you find out what your value is, and you've made that sale to yourself, then it's just really a matter of saying, well, how do I, what component, what part of me is different enough from other people that I can be who I am in the market, and people will buy into that. So the people who, obviously, looking at this chart, David, people who are looking for cheap and traditional solutions aren't going to be your customer, right? They just aren't. You're going to repel them. And that's fine. That's good. That's good news, right?
It tells you straight away, and it also tells you who. I mean, sometimes you might be nearer these. That's not wrong, but you're just doing it as an exercise to know who is around you, and it does give you the opportunity to test things. You should always test things in branding, business, testing different pages, design, look, and these kind of things. And you see the traffic and the amount of things coming in, and you might just move over. You might move over because you're getting more hits on that page. And it could be due to what you've done here, which doesn't take long.
Right. Yeah. And it really just confirms, as you say, carry on. As you say, it just confirms your attributes and how you're going to use them. So in the next slide, we're going to, I love this phrase. It's all about truth well told, right? And these moments of truth, this isn't mine. This is well known in advertising and branding and so on. But moments of truth are when your customer actually interacts with you. That's it. I mean, the rest of it's all strategy and so on. But when they actually come to your website, or they engage with you in some way, that's the moment of truth. That's when all of the work you've been doing, all your, the value proposition, all of the attributes and positioning we've been speaking about, that's when the rubber hits the road, are these moments of truth. And so if you go to the next slide, David, you'll see that this is known in the business, as it were, as touch points. So it's it's literal. It's whenever a customer touches your brand in some way. And by touching, we're looking at, it can be anything. It could be someone on the phone with you. Branding isn't necessarily about fonts and colors and people looking at things. It can be the music you hear when you walk into a store, right? Or even the scent in the air. It's anything that influences that perception of who you are. And so this is just a slide of some examples here, right? You can see in the store, there's like clean, right? That's an attribute. Clean is an attribute. It's one of those attributes we spoke about, as opposed to messy, right? So this is really about making a list of all of the different places that you or your brand is going to come in contact with your customer. So all those moments of truth, what are they? Just list them. You don't have to do a nice little diagram like this. Just make a list of bullet points of what those might be. So website, membership, course, whatever it might be, postcards, depending on what your business is. Just make a list of them all, because those are the brand touch points. Those are the places, the moments of truth, where all of your work is going to impact that relationship. And then
that's everything they're doing. So when they're interacting, what they're seeing, all these things, so you can pull it out. There's lots here. There's lots that you might not want to use, but as Iain said, it's those touch points. It's what the user is seeing, how they're interacting, what you're putting across to them, and those should be put down next to it so you can see.
Yeah, and it just really gives you a picture of your universe, right? Your brand kind of ecosystem, and it should be complete. You don't want to miss things, because you want to be able to plan and make sure they're all consistent, because consistency is one of the keystones of branding as well. We spoke earlier about trust, and inconsistent personalities are not a good thing. People are wary of them. So it's really important to be consistent in your branding, and making a list like this of all the touch points allows you to do that. And the next slide here, David, this is really about order. And I've used an example in terms of launching, but there's different ways you could construct this. But it's normally there's a pre-purchase, a purchase, and a post-purchase cycle. And you can align all of your touch points within one of those three. And here you can see before launch, there's some touch points like ads, Facebook ads, say, right? Social media posts, anything else you might want to do, direct mail, if that's if that's your thing. You're basically taking the list from the previous slide, and we're going to kind of categorize them. And the reason for doing that is because obviously your messaging will be entirely different before launch than it will be after launch. And the reason we're doing that is because your audience is different, right? So before launch, before you're in the pre-purchase, these are your prospects, not your customers, not your loyal base. So you're going to speak to them a little bit differently. Your messaging is going to be more general, because they don't really know who you are yet. You haven't established any relationship with them. Whereas after launch or post-purchase, the audience shifts. They become customers, and depending on how long they've been with you and what that relationship's like, that your voice, your messaging will be different, right? It'll be more detailed. It will be speaking to them more as a friend, and so on. So this really just helps to. And you can see it's titled here, Consumer Understanding, right? So from the left, they don't really know who you are. And then on the extreme right, they're loyal customers and almost brand advocates. So this just helps you to refine your messaging and make sure you're speaking to the right audience at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an amazing one, because it is you want to be transparent about everything, but definitely before launch and new leads that are coming in, you want to spend a bit of time you want to spend time with them even when they're in. You can't just let them buy something and leave them on their own. You've got to build this relationship up. You'd be amazed at how many people tell other people about your courses and bring them in there, because you spent a bit of time with them, and it's being helpful, and it's showing that it's not all about the money. It's about helping you, moving you forwards. And then they buy into you, they tell other people. And that is a really, really good thing just to keep that going. And before launch as well, you know, be transparent about it, help those people if they don't understand, try to take them through it. Sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can. I had one guy, he'd taken a free course on ZBrush, which is digital sculpting, and then he bought my bigger course, which is really involved. And he said, look, can I get a refund? He hadn't done much of the course at all. He just said, I can't do it. And I said, can I help you? He's going, I can't really get into it. There's nothing I could do at that point, but I showed that I was willing to help him. So he was like, well, if you do another course and make it easier, then let me know. So I've now got him as a lead. He's still in there. And later when I do a revamp of the beginner's course, I'll send him it. He'll learn it and he'll buy. And he'll also tell people that this guy's good. I couldn't get to grips with it, but he's good. And you build that trust.
Perfect. And it's also, I mean, I find maybe it's just my personality, but you know, if you don't have a system, if you don't have something like this chart we're looking at right now, then you're really kind of just, you know, shooting from the hip, seat of the pants, as it were, right? It's difficult to, you know, you're kind of just intuitively finding your way through when you're messaging people, whereas something like this gives you a certain order, and it's based on all the work the slides we've just looked at. You know, it's just really just a matter of aligning them. If you had this in like a PowerPoint, you could just drag the text fields around and order them this way, but then print this out, stick it up on your desk next to your avatar, and then you'll actually start to see where they are. You know, when you're talking to someone, if you're doing a Facebook post, you know, you'll know what kind of language you should be using. If you're talking to your membership, then you'll know what kind of language you'll be using because you'll have it all charted out. It's just a bit of order that gives some structure to your communication.
Yeah, it definitely makes it easier. It's like you're placing them. I mean, think like in the first, before launch, people are coming in, they're going through emails, you know, you're tagging them, they're coming through funnels or promos that you're doing. Again, you're tagging them. So straight away, you're actually putting these people in their little places, and you're seeing how they move through to launch and after launch, because you can track them going through, remove a tag, add a new tag, and you can actually see them coming through. This would be a perfect way to show them going through there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Zenler is perfect for that. The tagging system is just, that's what it's built for, right? Is really to understand and categorize who you're talking to when.
Yeah.
So awesome. And then this, now we mentioned this before, and it's the term branding is thrown around a lot, and you know, I understand it. It's easy to kind of define your logo as your brand and or your colors and things like that. And it is a shorthand term for those things, certainly. And I think everyone understands that. But actually, those are actually the tools, because you can see that the branding we spoke about already, branding is that dynamic relationship. It's really about managing those psychological selling conditions, right? And these are the tools you use to craft them. So, I mean, a logo is, I think it was Paul Rand or some famous designer mentioned that a logo is really the gateway to the brand. And it's a little signifier. It's like a signature, you know, it's something that you can look at and you can see it. And it's distinctive. Again, it needs to be distinctive. It needs to stand out. So this is, you know, it's a difficult situation when you're starting, because it can these are areas where there's a lot of psychology behind them. Speaking of psychological selling conditions, so like color theory, David, I know you've spoken about that, typeface choices and images and so on. A lot of these things, there are so many psychological reasons for them that they evoke emotion, and emotion is one of those very difficult to quantify areas. You can't really nail it, right? So there's a lot of trial and error involved in this, and a lot of research has already been done, which you can find online. But in any event, as we saw before, at its simplest level, when you get your attributes, right, when you have those defined attributes, let's go back to the playful example, for instance, then that's really going to help in your selection of color palette and imagery and typeface, right? If you have that word, in this case, playful, yours could be innovative or luxury. You know, a luxurious color palette is very different from a cheap one. So these tools are going to help you to craft those conditions purely by emulating or basically looking at your attributes and demonstrating them through the choices you make in these categories.
Yeah, Iain, I mean, what we've gone through so far, and we've got to the key brand tools. Basically, if you've done everything that we've talked about so far, you'll already have a clear idea on maybe not the logo, but if it's soft, if it's hard, definitely your color palette, typefaces as well, and imagery as well that goes with it, depends on the sliders. Also the voice as well. Voice is really important because there is a lot of study in voice techniques and things like that when you do videos. A very good one is to try and say things and keep it a constant rhythm, but maybe rise the voice when it's an important thing and then stop and then continue. So that flow, what you're trying to do with your voice is a bit like music. You're trying to get a continuous flow without too many interruptions, and raise the intonation as well as you're speaking. So it's hard to do, you know, and ums and ahs, everybody does it, but it's just trying to keep them to a minimum and stop yourself doing that is also hard. But voice plays a massive importance as well. And as Iain said, key messages as well, what you're trying to get across, it should be clear. My look on things, every brander works differently on the way that or designer works differently. Mine is clear. I want to look at a site and I want to know what that site's about in 3 seconds or less. If I see too much text and it doesn't give a clear indication of what it's about in 2-3 seconds, I'm out of there. And that goes for videos as well. So if there's too much of an intro at the beginning of the video, again, it'll annoy me. I've done that myself, and I've had students come back to me and say, your intros on every video are driving me nuts because they're too long. So you need to keep them short. So these are things that you need to think about that all are associated with what Iain's talking about now. Sorry, Iain.
That's all right. And that's pretty much the end of this, I think. What's the next slide there, David? Yeah, that really kind of sums it up, because it takes us from, you know, the why really at the beginning, why you're doing what you're doing, and why what you're doing brings value to your audience, all the way through to the actual, you know, branding tools that you're going to use to craft those psychological selling conditions. So that's, in a nutshell, that's really what it is. And as you can see, it's not all that difficult, and you don't have to be a huge conglomerate to do that for yourself. But there's a lot of insight in all of those exercises. You know, even at a surface level, you're going to find out a lot about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and remind yourself of it too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. As you see, so Iain's actually got that's in the course. So he's given us quite a big insight into all of that stuff now. So I don't know if you guys want to ask Iain any questions on any of that. If you put that into the chat, we can have a look. I'm sure Iain's, if you look at that and you see any questions come in, grab them.
Yeah, while we're doing that, I see like logo creations, you know, you can get stuck tweaking and so on. And that's true for 100% sure. I mean, I did that on my own, you know, and I have lots of designer friends. So I ended up, like, I gave out some sketches to designer friends and let them do it because it's just too close to home, right? So it's the same for everybody. And there, like I say, there's a lot of nuances and things in terms of shape and proportion, little subtleties that actually have, you know, they're tools and they're real subtleties like that if you don't really understand them, if you're not trained in them, it's very difficult to get it right. And by right, I mean communicate, you know, that psychological selling condition. So it's one reason why, you know, top design companies and branding companies charge so much for branding programs like that, is because they do understand all the nuances. Doesn't mean you have to have that at the beginning, but there's certainly, you know, a logo isn't just a logo. There's a lot more to it. And so, you know, as your business evolves and your brand evolves, which it does as you learn more and you tweak things, is something worth thinking about, is to define and perhaps get some professional help to kind of raise your game a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think with logos, very much so, because not just because you might have an idea, but the execution of it as well is really important. And there's certain things that you look at, and it's not as much as you think to have these things produced for you, you know. But if you've done the worksheet, if you've worked through the Branding Blitz, and by the way, guys, that is included in the course. Yeah. So Iain's allowed, he's put it on there, and you can download it. He's allowed you to do that. So you can download those slides and you can work your way through them and make them fit for you. But I would say with logos, it's definitely worth, it is a whole different field. You might not have the particular programs to be able to do the stuff. But if you work through that and you get yourself a color palette that you want to work with, then the logo will really help you as well. And that will push you forwards. So when you do get logos done, definitely, as you'll see in a minute, when I show you a kind of branding sheet that I did for William, make sure that they do send you all of the color codes for everything. So you've got the RGB, the CMYK breakdown, and the hexadecimal. Now, if that's gobbledygook to you, that's just the RGB, that's the color value. CMYK is the print value, so it's in percentages, and hexadecimal is just what we use for web, so that's just a number. And make sure that the designer that sends you back, any designer worth his salt, will send you all the color codes for everything, so that you can then use them in the Zenler system. Okay, so that's really, really important. So sorry, Iain, have you got anything?
That's all right. I'm just looking. I've been looking through the questions here. Some good ones, actually. This is great. But so, what happens if you find yourself in a blue ocean and have difficulty finding competitors? Well, I think that's a nice problem to have. I can't think of anything better than wallowing in that blue ocean. Frankly, you've got no competitors to go out there and sell like crazy. Big brands rebrand after 20 years or so. Yeah, there's been, a bad way. There's okay, brands evolve, but not just the brands evolve, the market evolves, right? In other words, that relationship, which I've called dynamic, the reason I've called it dynamic is because it's always changing. So technology changes, external changes, internal changes, all of these things drive rebranding. That's what it's all about. And I've done a lot of major rebrands in my career. Most of them are successful because there's a reason for it. The first thing to do is to find out, why you're doing it. So whenever you see a company rebrand or refresh their brand, and Burger King just did one, right, or something like that, there's a reason for it. There's a motivator. And in most cases, that is the foundation. And so the change in the brand ultimately is successful. There have been some that have not been, like the Gap. I don't know if anyone remembers a few years ago, the Gap came out and changed their typeface and stuff, and they changed their logo, and it was a huge failure. There was, it was just, they actually had to revert back to their original brand. It was so bad. The outcry online was so bad that that's probably the most recent event I can remember that it was just bad. What to look for in a branding company? I would say look for that strategic input. They have to understand what they're talking about. It's not just fonts and colors, as we said, right? That's very surface. If you go to Fiverr and you get a designer there and you don't have any strategy there, they're making eye candy for you, right? And it can be okay, but is it really going to craft the right psychological selling conditions? That's what you really want, right? That's the foundation. That's what's going to make a difference to your business. The rest of it might be okay, give you something to work with, which, I'm not arguing against that. But a branding company should definitely be all about, the foundation and what makes you different in your business.
Yeah.
And so,
sorry. With that, if you can't don't just get someone to do a logo for them. Don't just say the name of your website address and get a logo done. As Iain pointed out, you need to do a bit of it, because we don't know, like, we're doing jobs for different niches all the time, different markets. We don't know those, so we have to do research on our own. So those guys need research as well. They need you to tell them what you want. They need your vision, because otherwise they're just going to turn out a load of logos and they don't know, and they could look really good, but they might not hit your mark, and then it'll just end up being frustrating for you going forwards.
Yeah, Yeah, the more you can give a designer, the more information you can give someone, the better. The cheaper it'll be, for one thing, because you're giving them guidelines so they can actually use, right? So if I get someone coming to me and saying my brand's playful, then that immediately gives me a track to work on, right? Whereas if you just say I want a logo, then well, you got that dreaded white sheet of paper, right? Where you're kind of like going, I don't know where to go. So this exercise, going through this, even giving that to a designer, is going to save you money, because it's going to shorten and speed up that process, so that you're spending less time, and therefore you're paying less money.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good. Okay, right, guys, I'm going to move on to a little project that I did. It was a case study for this course, and Iain, feel free to jump in with any bits you want to talk about.
Sure.
So what we've got here is this is done very quickly. Don't get me wrong. It was done quickly. It was just to show William kind of the impact that you can get by just doing branding, and also some key things going on here. Now, you're going to notice straight away that this one on the right hand side is actually the original. Now, if we look at this logo, it's just all blue. It's really kind of old fashioned. If you can see there, it's kind of really kind of an old fashioned type logo. It's more of an infographic, and it's just doesn't look right in there. So the first thing I said to William is, do you mind if I just do a quick logo? I'm not going to do anything special. So I created this one, and it's basically his marketing. So we put his logo in there, and we started setting a color palette for him. The color palette was worked on a primary blue, a light blue, a red, a black, and a white. Now, I did all this before I even touched the website. So it's just purely based on the logo. Now, the logo is actually a target. So if you take all these and you sort of put them concentrically, it looks like a target, which is marketing. So, there's no brain surgery there. It's done very quickly. And then I just moved them about, and it kind of looked like a little person then, with a little head and little arms coming out. So it kind of worked quite well. I didn't expect William to actually take it and use it, because he actually wants to use it. So it was just an example, but he's using it. He likes it. So great. But with this little branding sheet, this is not a proper branding sheet. This is just a quick one showing you clearly some of the things that I did for it. The branding tool sheet, I should say. And that was to put the colors down, and I gave him hexadecimal colors there, which you can get inside of Zenler. You can put them in Zenler. And we also chose the secondary colors, which were basically tones of these colors, and the font we were going to use. Now, my personal thing, and I don't know if you agree with this, Iain, is I don't like to use too many fonts. I see these things all the time where people use, I have a max 3 fonts. I've seen some sites that have had 10, 20 different types of font. And also, I like to stick to a size. So if I'm doing titles, I'll stick to the same font type, and I'll make sure that I have the actual size for that. You can see there, titles, extra bold. I've just used the Open Sans for the website. Okay. So Open Sans is used for both titles at different weight types. So extra bold, 36 point. Body is regular 20, between 20 and 16, mostly 20. And buttons are extra bold in 30 pixels. So that's what I've set. And I did some tests, checked some sizes, made sure it looked good. And then I just wrote those down. And I wrote them down in this sheet so that when I work on the website, I can have it up and I can say, oh, I need to make sure it's 36. I need to make sure that's 20 or whatever. It gives me a guide. What colors do I want for the blocks? Oh, I can grab that color. I change it a bit, but it gives me a guide moving forward. So when I actually come to actually produce this page for William, I did it really quickly. So how do you feel about that, Iain, with that kind of approach?
Yeah, I totally agree with the fonts, especially, and it's really about visual hierarchy. And we haven't really, that's specific to design as opposed to branding, really. But, when people come to your website, the problem that most people have is they want everything to be big. Everything's important. And so they make everything big, or then everything's fighting with everything else and people don't even know where to look. So then they make different things in different typefaces to kind of make them distinct. And it just becomes very messy and busy, and difficult to navigate. And your viewer switches off, confused viewer never buys kind of thing. And so visual hierarchy is just a rule of thumb that I think everyone can use, which is, what's the most important thing on the page, right? If it's a web page or a course page like this, what's the most important thing? Okay, well, let's make that the biggest thing, or make it a different color from other things. But if you keep the fonts to one or two, and I'm happy to see like New Zenler, for instance, have those font pairings, which is great. Just pick one that fits with your attribute that we spoke about earlier, or pick a pairing. And then if you need to differentiate them, use, like you say, bold or italic or something, or isolate it and like give it some space around it. Or you can use color, and just a specific color for one piece of type, for instance, will really make that pop. So that's really the way to do it. That'll help to guide your viewer eye through the page. Yeah. And also, it's not threatening, right? It doesn't look like a lot of work. I'm not going to have to burn too many brain calories to kind of parse what you're saying, because people won't do it. They'll just click away.
Yeah, absolutely. So that Iain, that actually brings me on to the next point. So you can see that here on the left, this is the new design. This is the original design. So I had some problems with this straight away, which I discussed with William. One was the case that we're just swapping around too much. Like we've got bold in there with a font. Then we've got a font down there. We've also got bold in the copy. This is one of my real pet hates. The bold in a copy for such long text, and then leading on here with different sizes. So you've got different size here, different size here, different size here. Okay, so for me, that's a real problem. The other one is when you're doing a page or you're doing a site, it should be a journey. It should be a story. It should take people through. And as I was mentioning earlier, like 3 seconds, you should know what the site's about. So if I look at this site, a unique membership tailored just for you. But what is it? It's a unique membership tailored for me, but what? And then I have to read, do you want to learn how to become a digital marketer but feel worried, in a different type, different size? It doesn't lead on. It doesn't lead me on. So if you look at what I put, digital marketing made easy, a membership tailored just for you, bang, it's done. You know exactly what it is. Now, the thing is, we have type down here, but people probably wouldn't read it because they just look at it and just maybe leave the site. And so what we did here is actually took some of these points. This text here is all in here. It just leads on better. So there's more space around it. There's icons. These animate and push down, making the person go through the page. I'll show you the site in a minute. We've got a key statement there. Then we've got a little bit of text underneath it, another key. So you've got learn how to become a digital marketer, get results fast, 10 years of proven results. That's it. That's the message, but it's quick and easy to read. And then you've got the problem, the solution, and it leads you into it straight away. So then you've got here, then you've got unique membership, same as here, but darkened down. It's not the primary. People read this after, but they're reading this and they're following this as a story to go through the page. So that was the whole thinking behind that. So this is the actual site here now. So if I just hit the refresh here, you're going to see that we've got a little bit of animation. Now, in some ways, like I did this quite quick for William, but it's kind of over branded. There's too much color from the logos. There's probably too much brought in there. I'd probably knock it back if I had kind of a day or two to work on it. But you can see how things move down. So as you move through these, you've got these little arrows that kind of go down. So use a bit of animation. This is default. You can animate everything. In fact, if you look at Iain's tutorial, he actually shows some animation for a scuba diver, where he's got the scuba diver looking at something and then it's animating. So that's a really good use of it. If you can use an image that's looking at a statement or something, that's a really good way of attracting that attention. Doesn't happen so much in this site, but you can see how I've added animation to it as well. So what do you think of that, Iain, about the actual making something have a storyline and kind of like as a journey through a page as opposed to just being text?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, imagery is so important, right? So, that's why, you have hero images. So that's where attributes come in, is when you have your playful as an attribute, then your imagery, and there's so many great images you can get for free now with Unsplash and Pexels and places like that. But find something that's really high quality to lead off, that really hits your main attribute, right? And also your content, like what you do is important, because imagine you have to put yourself in your viewers' position where they're coming to the site for the first time. They don't know anything about it. So David, putting that headline, digital marketing made easy, right away, I know what the heck the whole thing's about. Whereas before it was like, what, where am I? So this is key, right? It's bang, I know what this is all about. And the image needs to support it, right? So it needs to be kind of copacetic and complementary in that way. And then use, like you say, you use visual hierarchy. So what's the next most important thing? And then also what's above the fold, right? Because when you get to the page, you're only going to see the top half, or even less in some cases, of what's on the page. So the most important thing needs to be right up front, which is the value you're going to bring. Why should someone be interested in this? So that's really what you've done here, is you've put that value right up front. So as soon as I get there, and then, it's like a headline is, the only purpose of a headline is to get you to read the subhead. And the only purpose of a subhead is to get you to read the copy.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the copy is to get you to click the buy button, right? So that's visual hierarchy right there. So you can do that. And, so when I get here, the purpose of this is getting me to scroll down, right? So it's unlikely I'm going to get there and just press a buy button. I need to know more. So that's the whole point, is to kind of get that hierarchy going, right out on a piece of paper, what's most important, and then kind of try and do your best to design it appropriately, like you've done here. Break it into chunks, so it's very easy to navigate. It doesn't look threatening. It's digestible, right? I can see them, and I can see those chunks. So if I'm scanning the page, which most people do, hardly anyone's going to read that. I want to make your journey shorter. Most people aren't going to read that, but they're going to see 10 years of proven results, right? So, make it scannable.
Yeah, and it's also leading up to it. It's like, Iain talked earlier about like colors and color theory and things like that. There's tons of stuff you can find on Google on color theory and the way certain colors affect your mood and make you do things. Red is very much like, it's attention, do something. This is grabbing you. Whereas blue's kind of more relaxed, like greens and more nature, and, oranges and yellows. And these colors can work together, like blues and oranges, these kind of classic color combinations. Please, stay away from clashing colors. Normally happens when people use pastel colors, use a pastel and another pastel color or another color on top of it. And then you get this kind of, if you can't read it nice and clearly, stay away from it, or change the colors to, I'm not going to get into clashing colors, but it's a big thing as well. So with this site, moving on from this site, actually, William has another site connected to this. And this particular one, this is a membership side of his site, but actually in the e-courses, he has loads of courses. So what we did here is, this is what I consider well over coloring using the branding colors, but I have introduced a kind of nice orange in here as well. Now, what he originally had was loads of courses. If you look up here, here's his categories. He's got tons of them, and he had all those courses. He had 3 or 4 courses in each of those categories. So his page just looked like a plethora of courses. And it was even like, what is going on? I don't know. It was almost like going to a Udemy site where you've got all these people putting tons of different courses. I wouldn't know where to start. So I sort of helped him sort of brand this page up. And I said, basically put them into different areas. So you've got each of them on there. So it's not going to you're not going to get overwhelmed. People are just going to click in there, go, I want a course on social media. So they'll click in there and just see his social media courses. It was a way, because he's got lots of content. He's got tons of content. He's got lots of freebies. And it was just right down the page. And really, you lost it because there was so much going on there. This block here, William's added this. I need to talk to him about it because this is not good. This is not good here. So Iain, what do you think of this section here?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. I mean, like the disembodied body, is difficult, as you mentioned. The color, white, there's a lot of accessibility issues. So there are accessibility scores. that you can look up. The white on that yellowy orange color is not ideal. It's just difficult to read. So, you know, that's one thing. The red doesn't actually help on that color either, honestly. And then obviously, like in the image, the pink shirt and the yellow background, these are clashing colors, as you were talking about. And they're, you know, they're kind of fighting and blending and all sorts of things going on. There's also, you know, I'm not really sure where to look. I mean, obviously the announcement is animated, but everything else is a little bit, you know, there could be much more of a hierarchy going on there. So, you know, what am I supposed to be looking at? You know,
Yeah, it's like it's like you said, it's like gridded up, but it's not nothing's framed. You know, even having a different background behind this. I mean, it's obviously used Photoshop to cut this out, so you needed to have continued it down or put yourself on an image. And in fact, going back one here, if I show you, this is kind of what I did for. Oh no, that's wrong. So it's obviously not linking to the right place. Oh, this is one of his other pages, but I can't show you. But I actually did it. I did him in a circle, which actually framed it all. So I suggest doing that. And like Iain mentioned here, we've got everything's kind of like you've got to try and keep everything kind of organized in a kind of gridded manner. Especially, I mean, if you've been doing this a long time, we can play around with these things because we're used to putting things in different position. But as a rule of thumb for kind of amateur trying to do this sort of stuff, try and keep stuff in very much gridded blocks. All right, don't play around too much with experimenting too much with it. Would you suggest that, Iain?
Yeah. I mean, grids are your friend, you know, and the simpler your grid is. And, you know, look at those beautiful column layouts in New Zenler, right? When you're building your page, there's 4 columns, there's different widths, but they're all grids and they work, you know, divide it into a section. So that's good. You've got a section here, which is the, you know, 5-day free blogging course. That's fine. One section, good. But then use grids. And what's happening here is you've got two, you actually have a column system, but because you've got centered text and then you've got the numbered list underneath that, which is flush left, you know, you're kind of like your eye doesn't really know where to look, right? There's no real alignment. So having a structure, having an alignment, which is what a grid gives you, is a key, and Zenler makes it so easy to do. Just stick to the simple structures.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, down here, this is the block that I did for William to the guide. So you can see the difference. You know, I'm sticking to the same center. I've got an image, a nice image here. And when this goes to mobile, this image jumps to the top. It all works really well. But the difference is here, you know, if you look at the two, you just think this block should not be in the site. It's almost like it's being worked on. So I'll pick you up on that, William. But it's good. He's trying it. He's doing it on his own. You know, this is good.
Yeah.
So that is a simple kind of like how you could do it. And it didn't take me long to put this together for William. So if you actually work through Iain's Branding Blitz, then you'll have a clearer picture. And obviously take time on your site as well. You know, you can do these pages, test them out, that, you know, do a screen grab or just put the link in there, put it on the Facebook group, and people will look and they'll give you an honest opinion on it. So that is good. So do we have any questions come in, Iain, on this? Good practice indeed. Brilliant.
Where to get a logo design now? There. Well, you know, it really, it's kind of like how long's a piece of string, right? I mean, if you're really restricted in your budget, then obviously there are some good designers on Fiverr, right? So what I would say about that is if budget's a concern, which it probably is for most people especially starting, get the strategy side done. Go over what we just spoke about in terms of value proposition and especially attributes, right? Because the more defined you have those attributes, you send them to a designer and you're going to get something that's going to create the psychological selling conditions. And that's really what you want. So find a designer if you want to go to Fiverr, that's great. There's a ton of local places that are good too. They probably cost more, but they might understand your market better. right? So that's the other thing, is that, remember, a designer is not really a note taker. They're not really there just to kind of push pixels around and stuff. They're actually there to interpret your strategy and into a performance piece of design. And by that I mean it helps craft those psychological selling conditions, right? They understand color theory and so on. So you want to make sure that you're finding someone who can do that. But again, save yourself some money and some time, and put the strategic stuff together, because that's really going to give you a huge head start.
Yeah, that's valuable advice there, because it's like we said, if you've got that information, you're giving it to someone, that information is really going to help designers to work on stuff, and especially branders as well. But when you're getting this stuff done, make it very clear what you want back. Make it clear that you might decide to say to those people, actually, can you sort of design a page out for me? It might not just be the logo. You might want them to put it into a page and actually give you a full kind of look and feel of what you should be doing to move forwards. So be very clear on what you want with these things.
I would say, and the other thing to think about is getting a little brand, like brand guide, almost like you saw David show earlier on, that shows what the fonts and colors are, a little palette, right? And it can be like 2 or 3. You don't want more than that, right? One color is great. If you can own a color, and we're back to that little chart we showed earlier, the axis chart. But if your main competition is using red, like Coke, and you're Pepsi, well, then maybe consider going blue, right? Just because of that. So little things like that. But get your palette together, pin it up there on your desk along with your avatar, so that you've got your color palette handy when you're in New Zenler, or build it right into Zenler, like in the branding palette, the section in New Zenler is built for that. So put it right in there.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a question on the group. Someone's asking about, William's asking about parallax effects and animations. Look, guys, we do have the ability to put animation on pages, and you could, if you use CSS, you could do parallax effects and things like that, sticky headers. That's all possible in the site, but that should not be what you're trying to do here. That should be just the icing on the cake. It should work without any of that. If it doesn't work without you putting a load of animation on stuff, then it doesn't work. We use it to just emphasize. You'll see again in the course, Iain's with the diver, and he's only putting the animation. It works without it, but he's putting the animation just to give it a little bit of icing on the cake. It's not to overdo it. You're seeing William's site there, the e-learning. I animated literally everything. So you might have to remove a bit of that, because it's too much. You don't want to be too busy and have too many things going on. It's just little bits of information. But for sure, if it doesn't work just statically, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You agree with that, Iain?
Oh, totally. I mean, it's like salt. You don't want to oversalt your food, right? It's just, you just need a little bit, and it's really about. It helps for pacing. So if everything's animated everywhere, people are overwhelmed and get dizzy and so on. But if you're scrolling down a page and a little button, just a little call to action button, just kind of fades in or something, that's just a gentle little thing that draws the eye, and that's what I'm saying. It's just a little bit of touch, just like you said, David. It's going to work without it, but having something small that animates is, it's going to attract the attention. Whereas if everything's animating, you're just going to put people off.
Yeah, and it can affect your mood. It can make you frantic.
Exactly.
So that's that. Right. So I had John contact me about his website, Iain, and he said, can we have a look at his one and maybe give some critique on his Play at Creation website? So what are your views on this? I quite like the image and stuff, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Color and...
I had a look at this yesterday, and the image is great. We mentioned high quality images, and this is a really great image. However, I have no idea what the page is about.
That's
for one thing, there's no visual hierarchy going on. I don't really know where to look. Everything's about the same size, right? So it's kind of like, wait, and savor life as a prosperous modern elder. Well,
Yeah, I know. I've read about it. I've read through some of the courses, and I get it now. But just like you, I was like, I don't know what that's about. But now I know. It's like when we get sort of older, you might choose hobbies and things to do to make them, but turn them into maybe a business. So maybe it would be painting glass or painting something, or turning your kind of thing into your play into a kind of thing as extra money coming in. Thing, but it isn't very clearly set. And I was looking at that and I was like, I don't know what it's about.
Yeah, I thought it was a painting. I thought it was like learn to paint or something at first because of the image, right? The first thing I thought was this is about painting. So that's the power of imagery, right? Because the thing about that is people are influenced by images and colors before they read anything. So, and it doesn't matter how big your headline is. The first thing they're going to be influenced by is the color in the image. And it's an emotion, it's a nanosecond to take that stuff in, and it's an emotional feeling. And if it's good and positive, then your messaging when they get to read it is going to have a head start. If it's negative or confusing, then you're going to have to work so much harder to kind of sell them or get your message across. So in a way, this is a great image, but then it's not really what the site's all about. And I had to work way too hard to kind of decipher what the messaging is all about, right?
Yeah, I was as well. It's like I love to go first impression on the site. I give myself 2 seconds and then I look away, and whatever impression I've got then is usually right going forwards. Because when I looked at this, it did draw my attention in because I like it, but I was like, but I don't know what it's about.
Yeah.
It really confused me, and I was also looking at things like air. Now, guys, putting air, a little bit of space, air around text. You need to be doing this. You don't want to be right up against the edge. It gives you an impression of being squeezed in a box. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly.
This has got a nice bit around it, but I'd give it even more. And also we doing that thing again. Now, one thing to take from this as well is consistency. On your site should be consistent. Iain's mentioned it a few times, related to lots of things going through this, and consistency is key. Make sure that you're sticking to those sizes and you're not going completely off. Like this text here, it just does not gel with the other bits that are going on. I don't understand why that is gone into that font there.
It's also very busy, David, right? I mean, there's like different sizes and weights of text and colors, and it's every paragraph there is different from the one before it, and it's not really working that well, and the colors don't really help either. They don't really align with the background image either. So here's a tip as well. While we're talking about that, when you have your colors, your brand colors, let's say you have a nice blue, like let's say a bright blue, look for that color in your primary image, because you want to own that color. I mean, part of it's recognition, right? So the 3 components of branding: recognition, understanding, and preference. So recognition is at the top of your funnel. So the pre-purchase part we spoke about, and colors important there, like owning like Coke Red or the Pepsi Blue, right? Find your color and own it. And one way you can do that is in this primary image. So, in the scuba diving example, David, you spoke about, there's a blue there, and it's obviously an obvious color for scuba diving, the color of the ocean and so on. But using it as a primary image really cements that color in the mind and helps people to read. So I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at the logo, looking here, it's the red and gold color. I'd like to see a lot more of that in the background image, and then a contrasting color for the box, the text box on top of that, so that you get that visual punch, if you like. The color acts and engages people, and then the imagery, the text rather, stands out on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got that ability to add a tinted color to it. So, and then if you used another color in there, it was really going to pop. The problem that you have sometimes with really busy pictures is it can confuse it, especially if there's not any space around the text. Lots of people also drop like black text on images like this, or they drop white text, and they won't put a tint in there. So what happens is, where it's going across parts of an image, especially when it's in responsive and it's going up and down, you can't read it. So that happens a lot. People put the text in there and you can't really read it because there's so much going on underneath. So dropping a little tint behind it can make it pop. You'll see that we've kind of done that for this. The tint of the blue is a dark blue, so it all goes together. And this is exactly what Iain was saying for this. We can drop that orange in there, and trying to keep all this stuff a bit more consistent, keep the fonts the same and the sizes the same, then it's going to make a massive difference. And try to get that headline to be descriptive so we know what it's about.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even going into courses, Iain, here, again, we've gone straight into the course page, and you can see I've got glass blowing, but it doesn't tell me what it's about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing here is the key messages, right? So everything needs to be super clear right off the bat. People don't want to guess and waste energy trying to figure things out. They won't. They'll just go somewhere else. Yeah. So, immediately, what's in it for me? They'll whiff him. What's in it for me? What am I going to get? What's the value here for me? Has to be top of mind, and obviously the first thing people look at. So when it comes to visual hierarchy, just think about that. What is it? What's the value that they're going to get? What's the primary? What's the transformation? What are they? Those kind of things. What are they? After they take your course, who are they going to be? So those are all keys to impactful site.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, now going back, making sure things are kind of consistent through the site as well. This is a major thing. I'm going to talk to you, John, about this afterwards anyway. It was nice. Both William and John, this is a really brave thing, putting this stuff out there to let people critique it. But remember that we're just giving you our opinion on this, and we know what we're talking about because we've been doing it for years. So it's really important that you pay attention to it and implement it in there. And as we said, ask the group. They would probably say a lot of what we've already said to you, but because you're close to it, and this is like I was saying to you with my logo, I gave it to a friend who's a branding specialist, and he redid it. So I didn't do it myself. I do logos for companies all the time. So does Iain. But it was nice for you to say that as well, Iain, that you sent yours off to someone because you're
totally
too close to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and and just looking at this up, by the way, I'm addressing a question earlier about columns and things, and 3 columns versus 1 column and so on. The key about that really is the length of the line. So if you have a full web page, especially on a desktop monitor, and you have a 1 column of text that goes all the way along there, people's eye will fall off. After about 65 characters, if I remember my design training properly, after about 65 characters, when they've read that, their eye starts to drop into the next line and so on. It's too long. So that's why you divide things into 2 columns, or even 3, depending on what you're laying out. And then when it comes to, there was a comment about using it on mobile. Well, that's, Zenler is great with the responsiveness. So you put in 3 columns and you have a text block in each one of those. When it displays on mobile, those are going to they're going to be structured so one under the other. So go for that. But remember the purpose of having columns is really simply to make the line length appropriate so that people can read it without any problem. It's not really a design thing. It's more legibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And try to stay away. Iain mentioned earlier about having your text sort of left justified, and then on above it you've got it right justified, and then above that you've got it centered. It really throws your eye out. Your eye out doesn't know where to go. Then it needs to be a nice. I always think of it as a nice curve. If you can make a page have a nice flow and curve through it. I do digital sculpting, so it's all about curves. Before I even do a model, I'll actually do a curve on my screen, and I'll follow the flow of my models into that, so it has balance. And balance is what you're trying to achieve in any of the pages that you're trying to design as well. and consistency, balanced consistency. All right, guys. So I think we are pretty much finished now. Again, thank you so much, Iain, for giving us your time here and going through everything.
Pleasure.
Brilliant. And yep, remember, you can also PM Iain. He's really helpful. He's really on. You're on the Facebook group quite a lot, aren't you, Iain? Helping people out.
I'm in there all the time. Oh, it's a great group. Really, really is. There's so much helpful advice in there from all different areas. So yeah, I'm constantly surfing in there.
Yeah, brilliant. All right. So we might well, if Iain's up for it, might well run another one, because we've had a lot of people are really interested in this. So I really would like to run another one at some point. So if Iain's up for it, I'll try and get him to come back to us.
Well, it's always a lot of fun talking to you, David. So yeah, I'm totally open to it. So yeah, and if people have specific questions, I'm in the group. So you know, post them in there. It's always useful for everybody to see other people's answers if you're up for it. You know, that's keeping things public like that allows other people to learn as well. You know, but I understand in branding sometimes you want to, you know, some things are proprietary. So, you know, just send me a message if it's like that, and I'm happy to get back to you.
Lovely. All right. Well, have a lovely afternoon, all of you guys. Afternoon, morning, evening. I think it's kind of midday for Iain now, isn't it? You're in Canada.
It is. Yeah, I'm in Toronto and it's lunchtime, so
beautiful.
Off to eat.
Lovely. All right, guys. So you take care. This video will be up in the replay page, and I'm going to put it in the live workshops as well, so you can get access to it there, because there's been a lot of really good stuff that we've been covering today. So thanks again, Iain. Thank you, William and John, for letting us use your case studies there as well. So take care, and I'll see you all soon.